The past is a chrome mirror that eventually reflects the truth you've been trying to hide from the world. Experience the sharp edge of a final reckoning, where every choice is weighed and every debt is paid in full. Click subscribe now and witness the ultimate moment of truth.
My son gave his brother-in-law a $47,000 fishing boat for his birthday. He gave me a gift card to Denny's with $4.11 left on it. I found out the balance when I tried to use it. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I tell you the rest of this story. Because the rest of this story is about what happened 3 weeks later, and none of it will make sense unless you understand what kind of man I raised or thought I raised, and what kind of man I turned out to be when the moment finally came. My name is not important. What is important is that I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the state of Ohio, and I have one son. His name is Derek. And I loved him, the way a man loves something he built with his own hands, completely, maybe blindly, and for a very long time, without asking whether it was being taken care of in return. Derek's mother passed when he was 19. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I kept working. I kept the house. I paid for his college without taking a single loan because I had saved for it since the year he was born, a little every month, the way my own father had taught me. When Derek graduated with his business degree, I drove 6 hours to sit in those bleachers alone, and I clapped until my hands hurt. I didn't tell him I cried in the car on the way home. I didn't think that was the kind of thing a father needed to say. He married a woman named Vanessa 8 years ago. Her family has money. Real money. The kind that has been around long enough that nobody talks about where it came from. Her father, a man I will call my son's father-in-law, owns commercial properties across 3 states. He is not a bad man, but he is the kind of man who measures love in what he can provide. And Derek learned that language faster than I expected. The shift was gradual. A missed Thanksgiving here, a phone call that went to voicemail and stayed there. I told myself he was building his life, which is what you want for your children. I told myself that distance was natural. I drove the 6 hours to visit twice a year, and I brought groceries because I noticed the refrigerator always looked thin, and I fixed the gutter on the side of their house that had been pulling away from the fascia since the year before. And I did not ask to be thanked. His brother-in-law, Vanessa's younger brother, a 31-year-old who had never held a job for longer than 8 months, turned 31 in April. Derek and Vanessa threw him a party at a rented venue. I saw the photos on Vanessa's social media. There was a cake the size of a dining table and a banner that read, "King for a Day." In the photos, Derek was laughing with his arm around the brother-in-law, and behind them, through the venue's bay window, you could see the marina where the boat was docked. $47,000. I know the number because Derek told me himself. On the phone, proud of it. The way you're proud of something you've done well. 2 weeks after that party, my birthday arrived. Derek called in the morning. The call lasted 4 minutes. He said happy birthday. He said he'd been meaning to send something. He said work had been crazy. I said it was fine. I said it was fine because that is what I had learned to say. 3 days later, a thin envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a Denny's gift card, in a birthday card that had a picture of a golden retriever on the front. No handwritten note, just his name, signed the way you sign a document you've been asked to sign. The gift card had $4.11 on it when I checked the balance, which means someone had used it before. I put it on the kitchen counter, and I looked at it for a long time. I am not a man who cries easily. I have buried a wife, a brother, both of my parents. I have sat in hospital waiting rooms and heard things no one wants to hear. But I sat down at my kitchen table that evening. 67 years old, 31 years of service. The house paid off, every debt settled, and I felt something I had not felt since the year my wife died. I felt like I did not know what any of it had been for. I did not call Derek. I did not post anything. I went to bed. And in the morning I got up and drove to the hardware store because the weather stripping on my back door had been letting in a draft, and I had been putting it off for 2 months. I want to tell you about what I found 3 days after my birthday. because this is where the story changes. I had driven down to Derek and Vanessa's city not to confront anyone, but because I had a standing appointment with a cardiologist there, the specialist I had been seeing since my mild heart episode 2 years ago. Derek knew about the appointment. I had mentioned it the week before. He did not offer for me to stay at their house. I booked a room at a Hampton Inn near the medical complex. After my appointment, everything fine. Medication adjusted. See you in 6 months. I drove past Derek's office building on my way back to the highway. I don't know why. Old habit, maybe. Or something I cannot name. His car was in the lot. I sat in mine for a moment, and then I decided to go in and say hello. Surprise him. Take him to lunch. Try. The receptionist knew me. She smiled and waved me back. Derek's office door was half open. He wasn't there, but his computer was on, and on the desk, spread out and weighted down by a coffee mug, were the contracts. I am a civil engineer. I have spent my career reading documents. I know how to read a contract. I stood in the doorway of my son's office and I read what was on his desk. And what I read was this. Derek's company had been offering private loans to small business owners, restaurants, landscaping companies, a small daycare at advertised rates of 9%. The contracts on his desk showed the actual rate, between 22 and 28%. The difference was buried in the language of a rider attached at the back, written in a font size I would have needed my glasses to read comfortably, which I was wearing, and which I used. I counted 11 contracts on the desk. I had no reason to think those were the only ones. I did not touch anything. I stepped back. I walked down the hall. I nodded at the receptionist. I got in my car, and I sat in the parking lot for 22 minutes. I know it was 22 minutes because I watched the clock. I want to be honest about what I felt in that parking lot. Because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story worth telling. I felt grief before I felt anger. That is the order it came in. I grieved first for the boy I drove to baseball practice, for the young man I watched walk across a stage, for every phone call I had made, and every gutter I had repaired, and every silence I had filled with the word fine. I grieved that. And then the anger came, and it was cold, and it was quiet, and it was the kind of anger that does not need to raise its voice. I drove home. I did not call Derek. I spent the next 4 days doing 2 things. The first was research. I had the name of Derek's company, and I had a general sense of his client base from what I had seen on the desk. I am not a young man, but I am not helpless. And I have a neighbor, a retired attorney named Gerald, who is 71 and sharp as a tack, and who owed me a favor from when I helped him contest a contractor's bill 3 summers ago. Gerald spent an afternoon with me. We did not find everything, but we found enough. 14 complaints filed with the state's Consumer Protection Office over 18 months, all withdrawn. The pattern of withdrawals was itself a pattern worth noting. 2 small business owners who had closed because they could not service their debt. A daycare. 12 employees. 43 children enrolled. That was 6 weeks from the same outcome. The second thing I did was check my email. 11 months earlier, on a Thursday evening, I had clicked a link in a newsletter I subscribed to. It was about a private equity firm that was restructuring. I had put in $3,000, which was money I had set aside from a consulting project. Money that was mine to risk. Money I had not told anyone about because it was a long shot, and I am a private man. I had forgotten about it the way you forget about a check you wrote to a charity. It was gone. It had served its purpose, and thinking about it again would only make you feel foolish. The email was from the firm's investor relations office. The restructuring had completed. The position I held had been acquired at a multiplied value. After fees and applicable taxes, my distribution was $240,000. It would be wired to my account within 10 business days. I read that email 3 times. Then I went and made a cup of coffee, and I stood at my kitchen window, and I looked at my backyard, which needed mowing, and I thought about my wife, and I thought about my son, and I thought about the daycare with 43 children enrolled and 6 weeks of runway left. I made 3 decisions before I finished that cup of coffee. The first decision was about the daycare. I called Gerald. I did not want my name attached to anything. Not yet. And Gerald understood that. He made a call on my behalf to a colleague who handled small business restructuring. Within 48 hours, a refinancing option had been presented to the daycare's owner through legitimate channels, at a real rate, from a real institution. The owner, a woman named based on what Gerald told me, had not understood how badly she had been trapped until someone laid the 2 contracts side by side. She wept on the phone, Gerald said. I did not need to hear that to know I had done the right thing, but I am glad Gerald told me. The second decision was about Derek. I called him on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after my birthday, 10 days after the gift card. He answered on the second ring, which told me his assistant had looked at the caller ID and it was a Tuesday when he had time. I said I would like to come visit that weekend. I said I wanted to have dinner, just the 2 of us, the way we used to when he was in his 20s, and I would drive down and we would go to whatever steakhouse he liked. He paused. I heard it, that half-second of recalculation, and then he said sure. Saturday worked. There was a new place Vanessa had been wanting to try. I said I was thinking somewhere quieter. He said okay. He said he knew a place. I drove down Friday afternoon and stayed at the Hampton Inn again. Saturday evening I met Derek at a restaurant of his, choosing a steakhouse actually. The kind with dark wood and good lighting and prices that would have seemed unreasonable to my father. We ordered. We made the kind of conversation that men make when they have stopped being honest with each other. He talked about a deal he was working on. I asked questions that sounded interested. The food arrived. After the waiter left us, I put my phone on the table, screen up, and I opened the photograph I had taken. Not of the contracts. I had not touched the contracts, but of the consumer protection filings that Gerald had helped me pull, printed, and photographed. 14 complaints, with 14 names, and 14 business addresses. I said, I need you to look at this. He looked. His fork went still. His jaw tightened in a way I recognized from when he was 9 years old and had broken the neighbor's window and was trying to decide whether to lie about it. He said, Where did you get this? Not la question. A calculation. I said, It doesn't matter where I got it. I need you to tell me if I'm reading it correctly. And I said it the way I used to help him with his math homework, not with anger. Not yet. But with the patience of a man who already knows the answer and is giving the other person a chance to find it on their own. He put his fork down. He said something about it being complicated. He said the clients had all signed the agreements. He said his attorney had reviewed everything. And then he said the thing that shifted something in me permanently. He looked at me across that table in that good lighting, in that dark wood restaurant, on his father's dime, even though he did not know it yet, and he said, Dad, I don't think you understand how business works at this level. I am 67 years old. I built bridges, not metaphorically actual bridges, actual load calculations, actual consequences, if you get the numbers wrong. I have understood how things work at every level I have ever operated at. I let him finish. I did not interrupt. When he was done, I folded my hands on the table and I said, I know about the rate differential. I know it's in the rider. I know the rider is written to be unreadable. I know about the daycare. I know that at least 2 businesses have already closed. And I know that the state office has 14 complaints that were all withdrawn, and I have some thoughts about why they were withdrawn. And so does the attorney who helped me find them. The color left his face. I said, I am not here to threaten you. I am here because you are my son, and I need you to understand something before I tell you what I am going to do. He said, What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to give you 60 days to unwind every contract that still has people trapped in it. I'm going to give you 60 days to contact every client, in writing, with a corrected disclosure and a genuine option to refinance at a legal rate or exit their agreement without penalty. I have a retired attorney helping me monitor whether that happens. And if it does not happen, I will take everything I have to the State Attorney General's office myself, and I will not withdraw it. He stared at me. And then he said, and I want you to hear this. because this is the sentence that I have thought about every day since he said, "You would do that to your own son." I looked at him for a long time. The waiter came and refilled our water glasses and left again. Outside the restaurant window, a couple walked past on the sidewalk, laughing at something, their breath visible in the November air. I said, "You gave your brother-in-law a $47,000 boat. You gave me a used gift card with $4 on it. I drove 6 hours to watch you graduate. I paid off this suit before you were born. I have fixed every broken thing in your house for 8 years without being asked, and without asking to be thanked. And you sat across from me tonight and told me I don't understand how things work. I said, I am not doing anything to you. You built this. I am just the person who loved you long enough to tell you the truth." He did not speak. I paid for dinner because I am his father, and because some habits are about who you are and not about what you're owed. And I drove back to the Hampton Inn, and I sat in the parking lot, and I called Gerald, and I told him how it had gone. Gerald said he was proud of me. I told him I wasn't sure proud was the right word. He said maybe not, but it was the one he was using. The 60 days passed. I will not pretend they were easy, or that Derek called me with warmth, or that anything between us resembled the thing I had wanted for 30 years. He called twice, once to tell me his attorney was involved, once to tell me the process was underway. The calls were brief and formal, the way you talk to someone you are afraid of, which I had never wanted my son to be afraid of me. On day 58, Gerald confirmed that 21 of the outstanding contracts had been restructured. 3 clients had exited without penalty. The daycare owner's new financing had closed. The 2 businesses that had already folded, those I could not undo. And I will carry that. On day 61, Derek called again. He was quiet for a moment before he spoke. And in that silence, I heard something I had not heard from him in years. I heard his age. His actual age. 39 years old. Young enough to change. Old enough to understand what change costs. He said, "I know what I gave you for your birthday." I said, "I know you know." He said, "I don't have an excuse for it." I said, "No, you don't." Another silence. Then he said, "The gift card was Vanessa's idea." And I let that be my answer. And I didn't push back on it. And I should have. I thought about what to say. I thought about my wife, who would have known the exact right words and delivered them without effort, because she always did. I thought about the drive home from his college graduation and the way I had cried, and how I had never told him. I said, "I cried driving home from your graduation. I have never told you that. I was proud of you in a way I didn't have words for, and I thought you knew. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I thought love was something you could feel without being told." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I think I've been measuring the wrong things for a long time." I said, "Then stop. I don't know what happens next between Derek and me. I am not a man who believes that one conversation heals what years of distance has worn down. The trust is damaged in a way that will take time. I'm not sure either of us knows how to spend. He has to rebuild something in himself before he can rebuild something between us, and I cannot do that work for him. I have learned, at 67, that you can love someone completely and still refuse to make their choices easier than they should be. What I know is this. The daycare is still open. 43 children are still enrolled. 12 people still have jobs they didn't have to lose. I did not do that for credit. I did not do it for Derek. I did it because I spent 31 years making sure the numbers were right, and the weight was distributed correctly, and the structure would hold, because if you build something and it fails, it does not fail in the abstract. It fails on people. My son thought I didn't understand how things work at his level. I built things that had to last. I think about that gift card. Sometimes $4.11, a golden retriever on the front, his signature in blue pen. I still have it. I keep it in the drawer of my nightstand next to the picture of my wife taken the year Derek was born, the year I started the college fund. The year I believed with complete certainty that the thing I was building would hold. I still believe that. I have to. Some structures take longer to prove themselves than others. You do the calculations, you check the load, you trust the work you put in, and you stand under it, and you wait. That is what I am doing. I am 67 years old, and I am still waiting. And I have not stopped believing in what I built, even when it has not yet believed in itself.